All right, everyone. I think now is as good a time to start as any. Um, as more people come in, I'm sure they will be able to sort of pick up from wherever we're continuing at that point. All right. So just laying out some ground rules for what today's session will look like. Um, the total duration. This is including sort of time for discussing questions at the end that you may have, should be about 90 minutes. So I think that ideally the way I'd like to structure it is that we have our discussion and that I sort of make the key points that I am trying to make, and at the end we can have a specific dedicated time solely for discussion, solely for questions, and I can help answer any questions that you may have. Just to set aside some ground rules. Can people on the chat type in 1 if they can hear me clearly, and 2 if they can't hear me clearly? Okay, I see a few ones. In fact, I see all ones. Okay, all right. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that works fine. Okay, great. Yeah, so like I said, yeah, we'll go over the content and then have time for questions at the end. All right. Just to set aside a few ground rules, we'd like to have this session as organized as possible. Simply because we want to make the best use of our time, right? And that kind of speaks to what we're going to be discussing in today's session itself, where we want to make sure that you make the best use of your time while building a study plan, and that you actually get something out of the study plan that you design. All right, so if I ask any questions, I think I would expect you to respond on the chat. Also, if you do have questions, I think that the raising hand function doesn't really work as well. It'd be more effective for you to just type it in on chat, and I can get to it, when I have time. Or you may notice a Q&A tab. And that would be a very clearly defined question, so I could answer them with no trouble. If you find that there is a lag of over 10 seconds, ping me on the chat window. If no one else is facing a problem, then the problem is on your end, and you'd have to sort of reset your connection and then log in again. But yeah, just hit me up with a message if you seem to be having a lag. All right. Okay, so let's get started then. So my name is Matoo. I am an economics graduate. So I've studied economics for both my bachelor's and master's. I did my bachelor's degree in Baroda in India, and I did my master's in Amsterdam. What a big part of, I say that, okay, I'm an economics graduate, and I do like, and I have, I would say, a fairly advanced understanding of a lot of economic concepts. However, a large part of what sort of helped me further my education and helped me make progress in the field that I wanted was the fact that I was good at taking standardized tests. Well, I still am, and I enjoy taking standardized tests. That seems kind of weird and almost like perversely masochistic in a way, but it is true. I find them to be quite manageable and straightforward for me. So I took the GRE back, like I took the official GRE, with ETS at the end of 2015. And I got a score of 336. So that was a 170 in quant and 166 in verbal. That being said, I prefer, working through the verbal section. That I prefer. For me, that's a little bit more entertaining. I don't dislike quant, but I think that verbal is sort of where I feel like I specialize. And yeah, I thought I wanted to do, I thought I wanted to join the corporate world, and then suddenly decided, okay, no, wait a second. What I actually enjoy is teaching. What I actually enjoy is sort of sharing these strategies with other people and talking to them about what they could do to improve their scores. And so that's how I became a GRE coach. When I'm not tutoring people, when I'm not instructing people for the GRE or the GMAT, I also really enjoy cricket and football. Very much into hip hop music, and I am. I mean, there's no other way to put it. I'm probably a nerd for history, philosophy, and politics. I love these subjects. I love having discussions about them, and sort of the intricacies around them. All right, so that's just to give you a little bit of a background about who I am. Now let's move on to sort of what Crackerbill does. Now, so you may have seen some of this from yesterday's session, but if this is your first session, of course, this would be helpful for you. We've been around for over a decade now, and what we try to do is that we want to be sort of the conduit, the bridge between you and your goals, right? So my view, and this is a view all across Crackerbill, is that ultimately you have the skills that you need to do the best job that you got to do, but you need some help in channeling those skills and making sort of finding the way to use them most effectively. And this is where the teachers and the mentors come in, that we help you with sort of trying to find out what is the most effective way to use the resources you have at hand and to get the most out of your obvious abilities. Because ultimately, people don't really fail by themselves. Like it is a system that fails people from being able to do the best possible job. So we want to make sure that that the system isn't failing you and that you're able to get the most out of what you already have. So here are just a few resources that should help you get started. So we have a GRE online course, which allows you to sort of pace your study program according to you. So we do have classroom sessions, but this gives you all of the content and it allows you to sort of decide on your schedule and sort of help craft your own schedule as to how you'd like to go about preparing for the GRE. We also have certain eBooks that are available with regards to what it is that you might be looking to study, how to help build your vocab, and also an overall guide to helping you with the verbal section, which is what we tend to find people have more concerns about. Finally, you can also find us on YouTube. There are plenty of videos that we put up on YouTube where we discuss questions, we provide maybe more generic strategy. We have other webinars that have been conducted in the past are also available on the YouTube channel. So there's plenty of free resources, there's plenty of material that's just out there to hopefully help you get started and help you figure out how to get the most out of your GRE prep. All right. Lastly, we have designed these flashcards. So there's about 500 cards in this pack, which are very sort of specifically designed with two things in mind. So these flashcards have a visual and the oral component to them. The part that you would read and the part that you'd see. And it's been, there's a lot of research tends to show that if you combine, like if you have a visual cue while you're trying to learn words, you end up learning words better. And if you use other, various kinds of mnemonic devices, it helps augment your learning greatly. The other thing about these cards is that, they've been specifically designed for Indian students. So the big challenge for a lot of people, a lot of Indian test takers, is that English is not a lot of our first languages, right? So if anyone speaks English at home with their parents, can you type 1 in the chat? I want to see if there maybe is anyone for whom English really is their first language. Well, I don't see any responses coming in, so I'm going to assume that that's not really the case. Okay, I see one response. So what happens is that that's one out of like almost 40 of you, and what tends to happen is that because English isn't the first language for a lot of people, learning words requires a little bit of that extra effort. It's not something that you've necessarily been exposed to the whole time. So there's a link to the flashcard, the Dropbox link to them, and you should be able to access. It's about 500 of them, and they're mostly challenging words that you could expect to see at the GRE. So they'd be vastly helpful in this regard. And the feedback that we've gotten from other students as well is that it's really helped them out. So yeah, just wanted to establish that. Finally, we have some blog posts that get put up from time to time where we discuss what you could do with your GRE scores, where you might want to apply, and sort of how to go about that process. I think yesterday's session had a little bit about your application process for universities. So that we have a lot more information regarding that on the blog post, and we do blog posts on a variety of GRE and GMAT related content. So yeah, be sure to check that out. And this is all free information, right? So you can't tell us that, hey, we're being held back by the fact that we can't access certain info. It's all available. It's all there for free. Okay, so all of that being said, all that having gotten out of the way, let's get started with discussing how we might build a proper study plan. All right, so why are we essentially here, right? We're here to understand a little bit about how the GRE works, how to beat it, and to learn how to approach the exam and actually build a plan towards trying to beat it. Now, in order to be able to understand this, it is important to understand certain other things about the GRE as well. So if you want to do well on the GRE, whatever doing well entails for you, like for somebody that could mean getting a 315 or above. For somebody that could mean only getting a 325 or above. Honestly, I think if you get above a 325, there's no university that would outright reject you on the basis of your GRE score. So like somebody like me, I might still get rejected by Harvard. But the reason that I would be rejected by Harvard would have little to do with the GRE score and more to do with other stuff like my education profile and how I may have done on my previous degrees. So yeah, so you need to understand sort of what is a safe score for you, right? What are you trying to get when you take the GRE? But also, why do people take the GRE? I want to hear some responses on the chat for this, and maybe we could discuss some of them and see how that works into building a study plan. So yeah, let me know why you're taking the GRE. All right, so some answers have started to come in. I see, people are saying, okay, I want to do a master's, right? Master's in science. I see some people saying that they want to secure admission abroad. Some people want to change their entire career field, right? So, that would help you do a master's. And with the GRE, your application has more rigor. Someone saying that they want to do the ISB MBA program. For some people, it's trying to get admission into PhDs. So in general, the reasons that people do it are you want to do a master's program or you want to do an MBA or, any kind of further education basically, right? You're on the verge of finishing a bachelor's or you're already done with the bachelor's and you're looking to do this. And with the added context of you're probably trying to study in a different part of the world. Right? Because I think otherwise applying to Indian unis largely have a similar approach other than ISB, which is deliberately international in its approach to teaching people business, right? So why it's important to know this is that there are a myriad of reasons why people prepare for the GRE. There are various reasons why people want, the various goals that people have and various ends that people want to get out of this, right? However, despite that, they're all taking the same, or rather you are all taking the same exam, right? So what the GRE, if we have to think of this from the point of view of the GRE itself, what this means is that they have to set a test that is capable of doing all of these things. They have to set a test that is capable of determining whether you should get into a master's program or not. They have to set a test which is capable of doing this regardless of the field that you may want to study. You know, some of you are saying you want to do a master's in science, some are saying you want to do an MBA. I did a master's in economics, which is slightly closer to commerce, I guess. Some people want to do a master's in literature. Some people want to do a master's in philosophy, right? And yet the exam that you take is exactly the same, right? The master's in to do a master's in philosophy and to do a master's in computer science, you're taking the exact same test, even though what you're required to do from these subjects is very, very different, right? So understanding what the restraints that the GRE has and understanding what the GRE itself is trying to achieve will be a core part of trying to figure out how to beat it and how to build a study plan that would help counter all of the challenges that you might face. All right. Now I'm going to ask you all a question. So you should see a polling option and go to poll number 1, and it says, what would you do if you had to take part in a gladiatorial fight in 2 months? All right, so you get told today that in 2 months' time, you have to fight in a gladiatorial battle, right? So for those of you who aren't sure, gladiators are ancient Roman warriors who would have to fight to the death in a circus, right? So you essentially have. You are captured and you're told that you need to fight somebody, and you fight somebody in a circus for other people's entertainment. There was a movie with Russell Crowe about it around the year 2000. That was a pretty big deal. All right, so I'm going to let the poll run for a minute or until about 90% of you answered the question. I see somebody's raised their hand. Just hit an answer on the polling option, and we can discuss the answers as they come out there. All right, so I see, I'm just going to close the poll now. I think, 2/3 of you have voted. And as I can see, as may be available to you now, I see that there are 25 votes and one person said give up instantly. And well, you know what? Good on you for doing that. I was hoping somebody might pick the joke option. A few people have said train intensely and become the best fighter in the world, right? So that's something that's nice. You want to do that, right? Of course, you want to try to be the best that you can be, and that this is an important battle. If you train very intensely, maybe you can get out of it, right? But the vast majority of you, right, 76% of you have said learn about your opponent and how to combat them. Now that's good. You guys have the right idea there. Now. You do have to train, all right? So for all of you, the majority who said learn about your opponent, you do still have to do your own training. You still do have to work on preparing to try and, do the best performance that you can do, right? And be the best version of yourself that you can be. However, there is a limit. There is a natural limit to what you will be able to achieve if you, have to fight a gladiatorial battle in 2 months, right? In all odds, the person that you're up against probably already knows how to fight, and maybe you do not, right? So there is only so much you can do in the next 2 months, right? Similarly for the GRE, if you find that you have serious deficiencies with either your spoken English or basic mathematics, there is only really so much you can do in 2 months. And even if you're all right at these things, you're not going to become absolutely incredible at these things in a 2 month span. You're not going to become Einstein or Hemingway in the next 2 months just because you spend 5 or 6 hours a day working on either your verbal or your quant, right? So ultimately, it is essential to understand your opponent to be able to understand how to fight this battle, right? If you're going to beat your opponent, you need to know what your opponent prefers, right? Are they left-handed or are they right-handed? Do they prefer using a sword or do they prefer using a spear? Do they try to go for attacks, to your upper body or your face, or do they try to attack you near your legs or your calves, right? All of this info is going to be useful for you because if you know your opponent's preferences, you kind of have an idea of what to avoid, as well as maybe how do you structure your game or your fighting style to counter that. So so ultimately you do want to try to do as well as possible, but a big part of that comes out of understanding what the test demands of you, right? So same with the GRE, you need to know the test in order to beat the test, all right? So what we're going to cover over the next 45 minutes or so, maybe stuff that you are already familiar with on some level. Okay, we're going to discuss the structure of the exam. We're going to discuss what the types of questions are that you might face and sort of how you might want to manage your time for that, and all of these sort of basic discussions that you may already know, you may already have encountered. However, knowing this information and knowing it with the rigor that I'm about to present it to you is going to be essential, because it will inform how you're going to approach your test, and it's going to inform what your targets might be as well and how to approach that. All right, so let's do this, and hopefully we can get through this stuff quickly, because I'm sure that some of you are already very familiar with this. You have 6 sections on the GRE. They start by tossing an analytical writing section at you, which is an hour long. It involves writing 2 essays of 30 minutes each, and you get no break between them. All right. To understand this from the GRE's point of view, the most polite explanation I can give you for why you open up with the AWA is to screw with you. All right. The GRE is trying to mess with your concentration, and they are trying to throw you off, essentially. Right, this is a very challenging task, and because it is only 30 minutes long. Right, you're not going to write the most beautiful, best analyzed, epiphany-inducing essays in the world. Right, like you can only write as much as you can do in half an hour. You're left feeling maybe like a little bit incomplete, maybe like, oh, I didn't achieve what I wanted to achieve, and then you're thrown straight into the other sections of the exam. Right. This is deliberate in order to, sort of play on your head, right? So this feeling of, oh, this plays on my head, and I don't think I did as well as I could, and maybe I'm not going to do as well on these sections because I'm thinking about this other stuff. It's designed for you to feel this way, right? However, knowing that they have designed this already takes some of the sting out of it. All right. So in this case, I would recommend, don't take the AWA section too seriously. There is a certain level at which you will be able to achieve doing this, and we do have material, to help you sort of figure out how best you can achieve it and how best you might want to approach it. But at the end of the day, don't take it too seriously, right? Your main focus is on your verbal and your quant sections, of which there are 2 each, and then there is another section that is either an unscored or research section that would be either verbal or quant. Right. So what this means is that you would have 3 verbal and 2 quant, or 3 quant and 2 verbal. And it is not very specific as to, which one you may have. You don't necessarily know this, nor would you know what, which of the sections you're doing is the unscored section. Right. And this is by design as well. If you knew what the unscored section was, then you would absolutely not put in the same effort that you would put into any other section, right? So yeah, the GRE wants you to not be aware of what that section is, right? In order to, be able to get the best testing results for themselves, because they're trying to test out questions to see if they can ask them to future respondents, right? So ultimately, the GRE is a test of consistently keeping yourself in the present moment. All right. So all throughout, what you want to be doing is focusing only on the questions at hand, only at the section at hand. and you want to make sure that all other thoughts and all of the other focuses that you have are being tuned out. Okay, so if you keep this in mind, what you need to be able to do is for 30 times 2, so 60, 35 times 2, so 70, that's 130, plus let's say another 35 minutes if you get another quant section, 165 minutes. That's nearly 3 hours of you having to stay focused in the present moment, only thinking about the question that is at hand. All right, and 3 hours is almost as long as the longest exams that you may have done. In addition to that, having an extra hour of AWA can't really help either, right? So this is a long process that requires you to keep yourself focused. All right. The good news is that there are plenty of people who take the GRE every year who don't do any kind of prep, who don't attend any webinars like these, and who just don't, who, you know, do their own research at home, and then that's it, and they go and take the exam, and that's it. They don't find out any information from anyone else, right? All of the challenges that they will face regarding the structure of the test, regarding, you know, maybe not necessarily being fully aware and prepared for exactly what is going to be thrown at them, and being thrown off by the AWA, and, you know, the fact that it is designed to sort of make you not be in the present moment. All of those are traps that they will fall into, and because you know this now, I am hoping that you don't fall into these traps, right? So this already puts you one step ahead, right? And this is essentially the first step of your 8-week process, understanding what the test has in store for you so that you can help specifically build towards it. I see that somebody has raised their hand. Can you put in the question on the Q&A tab? And then I can maybe, you know, take some time out to answer questions as they, you know, when they come up. All right, so just another thing that you may already know, right? You're scored from 130 to 170. This means that the lowest score you can get is 260 and the highest score you can get is 340. In general, a score of 325 should get you literally anywhere. But a score that's a bit lower than that could still get you into a lot of places. So you could have a score of maybe like 315, and that should also get you into most universities. That being said, this is an important part of the first step of your research, all right? So this is one of the first things that I want you to do in building your 8-week plan, which is to think about what are the universities that you want to apply to, why are you trying to apply to them, what is it that you want to get out of going to them, and once you know that you definitely want to go to a university, look up what their GRE score requirement is, right? At the beginning, I discussed a reference regarding being a gladiator. Now, if all you need is a 315 to the University of UX, there really is no sense preparing and stressing yourself out and putting yourself through all of the torture to try and, you know, reach out to get 325 or 326. There's nothing that you're going to gain from doing this, right? For you, success would be getting the 315 that you need to get into university. Similarly, you know, it could even be lower. It could even be that all you need is a 305. And if that is the case, that is successful for you. Don't try to, you know, force yourself then to push yourself to try and get some incredibly high score that, you know, is just a function of like, oh, okay, I want to do it for myself. I want to do it so that I can feel the best that I can. It is far more important for you to be aware of what your specific goals are and how you're trying to beat them, right? If you think about the GRE as a verbal and quant test, almost none of you are majoring in math and almost none of you are majoring in English. Why is this super relevant then, right? It's not necessarily relevant for you actually doing your masters. It's only relevant because it is believed that the skills that you are being tested on the GRE will translate to similar skills that you're being tested on your masters. However, they're not the same skills, so you don't necessarily need to push yourself unless your university requires that you get an extremely high score. All right. One other thing to keep in mind is please answer every single question. Okay, there's no negative marking on the GRE. This makes it very different to a lot of the other standardized tests that you can take. All right. And to be honest, this was something that I didn't know when I took the GRE. All right, like when I did it, I thought it was like the other tests that I'd taken, you know, like the CAT or like the GMAT or like the SATs when I was younger. And I assumed that, yeah, if I don't answer a question right, I'll get negative marking. So I should not answer a question if I'm not sure. And I left out 2 questions in the verbal section, you know, and I don't necessarily know that I would have gotten any of them right had I guessed, but I would have certainly given myself a better chance. So absolutely, you know, learn from this mistake. Make sure that you answer every single question, all right? There's no downside to you not doing so. All right, so I see 2 questions have come in. So I'm going to answer these questions and then move on, all right? So the first question is, which is the best country to do a master's in supply chain management? To be honest, I am not really the best person to answer that question for you. I can only tell you what doors the GRE might help open for you. Honestly, when another thing that I would say though, because I think that this is probably a good teachable moment, is that when we say best country, your perception of what is best could be very different to my perception of what is best, right? If we say that, you know, for example, to make a very bland statement, if we say that, say, India is the best country in the world, what are we judging? What are we judging that on, right? What is the criteria that we have decided that something is the best on, right? I have decided, despite studying in other countries and despite living in other places, that I wanted to come back to India. So presumably for me, you know, that does seem like a little bit like, you know, the best option for me. But that's based on the criteria that I chose, right? So best is a bit of an iffy question. You have to consider what your goals are ultimately, right? You have to consider what it is that you want out of your education and what you want out of doing a master's in supply chain management. Does GRE help in getting scholarships? Sometimes it does, though it's becoming less and less common. They're not as likely to hand out scholarships as they used to. So, I mean, it's still worth doing well in the GRE and trying to apply for scholarships. I absolutely recommend that you do that. But, you know, it's not as prevalent as it used to be. I see how to prepare for the AWA. We have specific sessions dedicated to that. I don't think this would be the focus of the session because we'd be working more on, you know, like building an overall study plan. However, what I would say is look up the material that we do have. And if I have to give you one tip to keep in mind, it would be to make sure that the organization of whatever you write is very clear. So if you have like one idea that you want to bring forward, develop that in one paragraph. The moment you change your idea, change the paragraph, okay? For whatever reason, the GRE, as well as, you know, all of these tests that are administered by American institutions, they tend to value how well you've structured your essay, you know, even if it's not the best in terms of content. I'm sorry, I can't really skim through yesterday's lecture, you know, because, yeah, like we have our own time schedule and we have to get through it. I mean, also yesterday's class was taken by Shrikala, and I think it was specifically about admissions for you know, different universities, and I think she's more of an expert on that field than I am. All right, I'm going to answer this last question and then move on. The difference between an MSc and an MS, there isn't really any difference. It's just that in India we always say MSc, and in North America and in Europe it's more common to sometimes just say MS. They use both of them there. So an MS is just a master's in science. All right, so let's move on with the presentation. So, okay, so like we said, yes, there's the verbal section, there's the quant section. The analytical writing section is scored on a 0 to 6 scale, but it doesn't necessarily matter if you don't do as well on the analytical section as you do on the others, all right? It may be a problem if you're getting something like a 1.5 or a 2, but as long as you structure your essay even half decently, even the content doesn't have to be great. So, you know, you'd be fine on that section, so long as you keep this in mind. What you really need to focus on are your verbal and quant sections and getting a decent score for them, right? So let's look at what you might expect to see in quant and what you might expect to see in verbal. So In quant, there are essentially 4 types of questions you can get. One is a quantitative comparison, which is essentially you're given sort of 2 quantities and you're asked to say which of them is greater. Are they the same, or is it not possible to tell? So you get to give you a very, very dumbed down example of that. You could get, for example, square root of 4 and 2. And then you'd be asked, is quantity A greater? Is quantity B greater? Are they both the same? Or is it impossible to answer this question? And the correct answer in that question, I hope you didn't automatically say they're the same. It is impossible to answer the question because the square root of 4 could be plus or minus 2, right? So that would be a good example of what a quantitative comparison question would be like. Multiple choice answers, I think, are pretty straightforward. You have a question and then you have 5 options. You have to pick the right one among them. Single choice answers are a bit more like data entry. So you actually have to physically input an answer. All right, so you have to physically input an answer that's given to you, and yeah, make sure that that answer that you put is correct. So that's a lot harder to guess correct, you know. But yeah, so these are essentially the types of questions that you'd expect to see in quant. What you'd expect to see in verbal is questions that are, we organize the quant questions more by the forms that they would take, because ultimately the topics that they would take are all of the generic stuff that you've already done in mathematics. It's arithmetic, geometry, the very mild basics of trig, and some statistics and probability. And none of it is material that you would have covered past grade 10. So if you're the kind of student who, if you were the kind of person who decided that they didn't like mathematics and pick subjects to avoid mathematics after class 10, that it should still not be like a supreme challenge for you to answer quant on the GRE. All right. On the other hand, with verbal, instead of organizing it by forms, we've organized it by sort of the types of questions that you can get themselves. And they can be broken down essentially into 4 types: sentence equivalence, text completion, reading comprehension, and critical reasoning. It's essential to know that these are the types of questions you can get, because when you build your study plan, you want to build it with a specific focus to addressing these kinds of questions. All right. We will discuss this a little bit more in depth, but essentially you can break this down into just 2 parts, where sentence equivalence and text completion are one, and reading comprehension and critical reasoning make up the other. All right. Now I'm just going to stop you for a second and ask you a question. What is more challenging between verbal and quant? All right. So I'm opening up another poll. And just like I did with the last one, I'm going to set maybe about a minute to a minute and a half. And I'd like to see your answers come in here. When I say what's more challenging, I mean what is more challenging to you, right? What do you think is hard? It's not like this is a question that can be objectively answered. There are a few more people, you know, participating at the moment. So maybe let's take it up to a minute and a half, and hopefully either that, or if I get, you know, say 80% of responses, 80% of the total number of people responding. All right, I see some answers coming in, and it's as I expected. A lot more people do think that the verbal section is harder. If you think the quant section is harder, come on and vote, right? Make your voice heard. So, you know, if enough people do think the quant section is harder, I will touch upon it a bit more, and I will, you know, dedicate a little bit more time to it relatively. Conversely, if verbal is your worry, yeah, absolutely, just go for that as well. All right, I'm done with a minute and a half, and I think like 3/4 of you voted. I think that's good enough. So if you take a look at the results, 86% of you just think that the verbal section is harder, and just 14% of you think that the quant section is harder, right? So 6 times as many think the verbal section is more challenging than the quant. Now, that's not surprising to me. It's something that I, you know, absolutely expected. And because of that, you know, we tend to focus our preparation. We tend to focus even the advice that we give to be a little bit more focused on verbal. I won't not talk about quant at all, but the focus of this session will be a little bit more verbal focused than quant, all right? Just because I think that seems to be the problem for a lot of people, right? And that's absolutely understandable. I mean, there are challenges that we face that that other students, or rather the majority of test takers of the GRE, don't necessarily face, right? So, English is not a lot of people's first language. I just got one person on this chat who is like, English is my first language. So that's something that we have to work around. Building your vocabulary is also a very big challenge for a lot of people. And there are other, you know what? I'm actually going to open this up on the verbal section. Please send in messages on the chat where you let me know what your trouble is with the verbal section, what you think are challenges, aside from the vocab and aside from the fact that English is not our first language. Because I'm sure there must be other problems and we can discuss those as well. But yeah, just put it in on the chat, not on the question answer group, and I'll discuss them as they come. But yeah, the verbal section does tend to be a bit of a challenge, and this is expected for us. So when we try to get around this, we're going to discuss sort of how do we approach the verbal given these disadvantages? How do we build a study plan, based on these disadvantages, and sort of how do we negate this? How do we get around it completely? All right, I don't see any responses coming in the chat, so I'm going to assume that these are the main challenges for people, right? Like building your vocab and the fact that we have to get around English not being the main language that we read. Okay, so all right, let's now try to understand the basics behind how we are going to build a prep plan. Okay, I'm going to call this the two-pronged approach. You can call this whatever you want, but essentially there are two fronts on which you're going to have to fight this battle. All right, there are two fronts on which you're going to have to try to figure out how you're going to approach the GRE most effectively. And they're essentially the generic front and the specific front. So what you're going to try to do is, on the generic level, is the stuff that is the actual concepts that build what you're going to solve, right? So what that would mean in, with regards to, say, preparing for quant, that would mean, hey, I need to work on my arithmetic, I need to work on my geometry, I need to work on my trig, I need to work on my statistics and probability, I need to work on these, and algebra, of course. Yeah, so I need to work on these, these key general concept areas, and I need to be able to do these at a certain level so that I will be able to answer GRE-based questions for them, right? If you don't know your geometry, if you don't know that, say, vertically opposite angles are equal, then you can't answer a question related to vertically opposite angles. Incidentally, the vertically opposite angles being equal is a great, it's a great rule that you can use to apply when you're trying to split a pizza. So if everyone just picks alternate slices rather than splitting a pizza down the middle line, because of vertically opposite angles, you are actually ending up picking picking equal amounts of pizza. So yeah, that's hopefully interesting information for you and something to notice when you have pizza with your friends next. But yeah, so you do need to have that generic knowledge. You do need to have that base knowledge, right? Similarly, with the verbal section, the sort of general stuff that you do need to be able to have are the ability to read at a relatively decent speed, or rather the ability to read and pick up important information from what you read. And, a relatively high vocabulary that would help you understand the words that come up when you have questions that are a bit more vocab focused, like sentence equivalence and text completion. All right, so that's the generic level at which you have to build the stuff up, and that's the stuff that you have to do in the background. That's your foundation. Upon this, you can actually build your skyscraper or beanstalk or whatever it is that you want to call it, but it'll be based off of the foundation, and that would be the specific level of prep. And that is focused explicitly on the types of questions and how to solve them. And you can't ignore either, and you can't make your approach only consider one of these things, all right? So on the one hand, you have to work on your vocab, you have to work on your math concepts, you have to work on, sort of practicing just reading more in your life. You have to do these things because they will help influence how you do your specific prep, all right? When you're doing your specific prep, where you target the question types, you having done your generic prep better will help you do the specific prep a lot better, all right? So you do need to work on both of these levels, and you can't ignore them, all right? You do need to understand, and you need to be aware that this is how you're doing your prep, all right? So I see a lot of students, they're like, oh, I'm going to study for the GRE, and they study in a sort of haphazard manner. They maybe get a practice test. They do a bunch of practice tests, so they get like a book or two and work through some practice questions, read some of the theory about solving questions for them. But they're not necessarily aware what specific areas they're targeting, right? Now, in order for you to get the most out of the preparation you do, you need to be able to know what it is specifically that you're targeting. If you don't have a goal for your session, you're not going to get anything out of the session, because there's no way to know whether you achieved what you were looking to set out or not if you didn't even know what you were looking to set out to achieve, right? So it is essential that you understand what it is that you want to achieve, what it is that you are trying to target, and set goals specifically based on that, all right? So generic and specific approach, very important to consider. Now I'm going to ask you a sort of final poll at this stage. There are 2 questions out here, so maybe a little bit more time for you to send in your answers. But essentially it goes, have you taken a GRE practice test yet? And how many have you taken? And if you haven't taken any, just pick 0 to 1. All right, so the poll's in progress, and you should be able to send in your answers on the polling platform right now. All right, so I see some responses coming in. The moment 80% of you have voted, I will just close the poll. I think that should be fine. That would be a pretty representative sample. Okay, I think the responses have dried up, so this is good enough. I got 32 out of 42 responses. Okay, decent. So I'm going to end the poll here so you can see the results. So I see that 11% of people have taken a GRE practice test. Another 5% of people answered the yes, but actually no, which was, partly a satirical option, but also I do understand that there are people who have taken a test, but they've taken it maybe in very iffy conditions, or they haven't taken the full test, or they've seen what the questions look like, but they've not really taken the test in the way that you could say, I've taken a practice test and I know sort of where I stand. So fair enough. And I can see that a large number of you have not taken a test at all, right? So 22 out of 34 people have not taken a test. For people who have raised their hand, can you just put the questions on Q&A, and then we'll discuss them, at a break point that'll come up soon. All right, so yeah, so I see that a lot of people have not actually taken a practice test yet, right? Similarly, again, when I look at the how many taken, okay, good. No one's taken 5 or more. All right, I was honestly worried that might be the case, but that's actually very good news. Okay, so if you haven't taken any tests yet, or you've just taken the one, fantastic. That's a great place to start. If you've taken a couple of tests, that's also fine. But we're going to look at the approach as well towards practice tests, what role they serve for you, and how to get the most out of your practice tests as well, all right? So that's also part of this specific prep. Now, when we come to structuring a study plan, there are essentially two base details that no matter what you end up deciding to do when you craft your study plan, these are two things that you absolutely have to do, no questions asked. I will be pretty mad if you don't do that, all right? One, you have to be building your vocab all the way through. Building your vocabulary is an organic process. It is not one that you can, decide, hey, I'm going to spend 3 weeks, I'm going to like go on a crash course and build my vocab and I'm done. It doesn't work like that, all right? We're trying to make up for, 2 decades of maybe not learning enough words, right? So this is something that you have to be consistent about and make sure that you start from day one itself with vocab building, all right? The next thing that you want to make sure that you do is space out the practice tests that you do, all right? Some of you may have taken the CAT, all right, which is, taking for business, like if you're trying to get to business schools in India, right? So if you've taken the CAT, you may have been familiar with the fact that a lot of the prep courses for the CAT allow you to take like 15 to 20 practice tests, simply because the CAT is an exam of very, very fine margins, and you want to get consistently in the rhythm of taking that test. The GRE is not like this, all right? And there is very little to be gained post maybe say your 5th practice test. There's not much that you would actually get out of it, right? So what you want to do is space out your practice tests and understand the role that they actually serve. Rather than just helping you get into the groove for taking a test, what a practice test lets you do is, well, one, it helps you understand where you made mistakes, so what your weak areas are. Two, it helps you prepare sort of for the conditions you will need to experience while taking the exam. So you will actually sit and do the test over a long period of time. You will have to keep your focus up, which is something that, otherwise maybe you haven't solved like that many questions in a row, right? Solving 20 verbal questions in a row does take it out of a lot of people, and that's understandable. So doing a practice test does sort of at least get you acclimated or help you sort of be aware of the fact that this is what you're up against and this is the challenge that you need to set yourself out for. And lastly, a practice test allows you, it allows you further analysis of where you're at. Right? So not only does it tell you, okay, I am currently at this level, it allows you to analyze in every detail, okay, how am I doing for time management? How am I doing for sentence equivalence questions in particular? What is my difference in approach to verbal and quant? Do I need to tweak how much time I've set aside for these sections based on the score that I'm at, right? And lastly, it will help chart your progression, right? So all of these things are relevant, but they're also relevant in the context of, okay, I did a practice test today. 3 weeks later, I'm going to do another practice test. What was the progress that I made here? Did I get better at doing anything in the verbal section? Did I not make any improvement? Did I not make the improvement that I was hoping to make in a certain part? Did I actually think I was good at something, but it turned out that the first time it was a little bit of a fluke that I did well in it, and I now know that I need to work more on it, right? Understanding the progression that you're making is essential, all right? And as long as you chart your progression effectively, you will get more out of your verbal, you'll get more out of your GRE. All right, so just to give you a little bit of info on the sections of the GRE verbal, right? So we discussed that you have sentence equivalence, text completion, reading comprehension, and critical reasoning. Here's a little bit of a breakdown of what this entails. So sentence equivalence is 20 to 25%. If you are good with your quick maths, that means that it's 4 to 5 questions out of 20 in a section. Text completion is 25 to 30%. That is 5 to 6 questions. Reading comprehension is about 8 to 10, right? 40 to 50%. And you may not get critical reasoning questions. You tend to see them more at the higher levels. Like once you're pushing, say, about a 160 or so, you'd expect to see more critical reasoning questions. So it is very possible that you may not see one as well. But if you do, they would make up maybe up to about 10% of your test. You wouldn't expect to see more than 2 CR questions in a section. All right, so if you look at this, you can split it 50-50, right? Sentence equivalence and text completion together make up half of your test. And reading comprehension and critical reasoning together make up half of your test, right? Or half of your verbal section, right? Keep this in mind because it's going to be relevant when we discuss how to sort of plan your practice sessions based off of that. All right, now going back to the generic level, right, on which you want to build your vocab and on which you want to build your reading ability so you're comfortable with reading the kinds of texts you would on RC. We have essentially 3 approaches, all right? And these are things that you would have to do simultaneously, but these are the ways in which you're going to build your vocab, all right? So we have mnemonic devices, which are, you know, the Crackerbill flashcards that we showed you at the start of the session. Word groupings, where you take groups of words and you sort of arrange them based on the level of nuance, or you group them together based on like the scenario in which you might find them. A good example of this would be to think of like being firm, pig-headed, or obstinate. And those all by dictionary definition kind of mean the same thing. But, you know, to be firm tends to have a neutral or sometimes positive connotation. On the other hand, to be obstinate and pig-headed have only negative connotations, and, you know, to be pig-headed is like the lowest of the lot, right? But these words all mean the same thing. So it'd be a good idea to group words that have similar meanings, but the nuance is a bit different. Similar meanings, but the context in which you might use them is a little bit different. These are all good ideas to sort of stay ahead of the game. Lastly, the most important way in which you can build up your vocab are using word roots. All right. So there is a book called Word Power Made Easy by Norman Lewis. You can get this on Amazon, and it's very inexpensive, and I think it delivers pretty quickly as well. And the way that it goes about teaching you new words is through word roots. So what that means is that it'll break down a word and show you what the etymology of that word is, how that word came into being. And through that, you would be able to understand the meanings of words that are similar. So, for example, in Latin, when you say I'm sorry, you say mea culpa. All right, of course, like very few people actually speak Latin today. But mea culpa means I'm sorry, and the literal translation of this is my fault. From this, a lot of the words that we have related to fault or blame originate from mea culpa. So when you see the root C-U-L-P, culp, that tends to mean to be at fault or to blame, all right? So, you know, for example, the word culprit, right? That is the person who is to be blamed. The person who is at fault is the culprit. When you, if somebody is responsible, if somebody is to be blamed and somebody is at fault, we say that they are culpable. So you are culpable for your own mistakes, right? Similarly, you know, there are other words like this as well. So if you want to indicate that somebody is to be blamed, you are inculpating them. You are bringing them into the realm of blame. Similarly, if you are excluding them from being blamed and you say that, oh, they played no part in this, they're not at fault, you are exculpating them. All right. So through understanding one root word, that's 4 new words that I've given you right there, right? So learning root words is the most efficient and effective way to build your vocab. And if you get word power made easy, the way that the word root lessons are structured is such that they have, I think, 42 exercises, which each take about 20 minutes. And they teach you maybe a few, like 4 to 5 root words. And through that, maybe another 40, 50 words in your vocab. So word roots is honestly the most effective way to do it. If you are prepared to put in 20 minutes a day, you can, in the span of 7 weeks, you know, let's assuming that you work 6 days a week on this. In the span of 7 weeks, you can go from, you know, having an average to moderate vocab to having a stellar vocab, right? Having an absolutely fantastic vocabulary. So this is something that I absolutely recommend that you get ASAP and, you know, start preparing for, right? Because you want to be doing vocab all through the 8 weeks. You need to be doing it all throughout. You need to be doing it all the way from now till up to the time you actually take the test. All right. So these are 3 very direct approaches to building your vocab, and they're all very valuable. However, there's another approach that I'm going to discuss that is not only valuable for building vocab, but also valuable for sort of helping you approach, you know, reading and in general verbal itself. If you like doing something, start reading articles about it. Go deep into it. Maybe even read Reddit forum articles that are about the topic that you like. Go very, very deep into the thing that you're into. Okay, and when I say this, if I say what you like, oftentimes when a teacher asks you what you like doing in your spare time, people give very bland answers because I don't know, it sometimes feels a little bit weird to tell the teacher that, like all of the real stuff that you like doing that is interesting. But I'd say don't hold back here. If all you like doing is watching Netflix TV shows, look up some articles maybe about Netflix, about how it came to dominate the landscape of, rentals or rather of how we consume video content, right? And how it replaced Blockbuster or whatever existed before. Look up articles about that. If there's specific shows that you like, go to an avclub.com, article and read about it. It'll talk about, because it will talk about the TV show that you like in a lot more detail. It will talk about the cinematography, it'll talk about the set composition, it'll talk about the themes, the tropes that your show might be about. And these may be words that you're not familiar with, but because it's about something that you like, you will actually put in the extra mile. You will actually make the effort to try and understand what it means. All right, so yeah. When it comes to vocab, find the things that you really like doing and go very deep into them. And you know what, like I said TV shows as an example of something that may be a frivolous thing that you like. I'm going to be honest with you and tell you that, like, I like video games and I like memes. And I go and actually read articles about these things. I read articles about video games and maybe how, switching to 3D has changed the way that role-playing games pan out. Or maybe how, memes are being used to fight political battles all up and down social media, right? I will go and read these articles because I care about these things, all right? So this is something that I want you to be doing, right? So if I say that you want to spend about 20 minutes of your time per day going through Word Power Made Easy, I'd say also read one article at least about something that you like. And that's almost not like studying. It's almost like the studying that you can do when you need to procrastinate, right? When you have something more serious you want to do, you can say, okay, you know what, I'll just read this article now. And while that is procrastinating, while that is not doing the main thing that you want to do, it still helps. So it's a fantastic thing that, you can sort of slot in at any time when you're feeling a little bit bogged down. All right. Now, when it comes to RC and CR, the approach that you're going to use essentially is the same, and that is called mapping. All right. What you're going to do is not read every single sentence on an RC passage. What you want to do is just focus on the important details, focus on what is an important, say, transition in tone or an important idea that the author is trying to put forward. You want to get a surface level understanding of all of these things and note them down. All right. So you want to make a map that includes information regarding this stuff. All right. When you do see a passage, what the important stuff that you want to include in your map is the gist of the passage. Now, you may know the gist of something as an actual word, where, the gist of a passage is just sort of like you're boiling it down into a few main ideas that the passage is about. But we are using gist here as an acronym as well, all right, which actually does translate to really being the gist, all right? It's the general idea, the structure, and the tone. These are the things that you want to get out of the passage that you read, all right? So you want to make sure that, you maybe achieve that. I'm not going to go over like a specific RC passage and how you might do that, because this is more about building a study plan than solving questions. But yes, what you want to do is be able to make a map, all right? So that's for RC and for CR questions, right? That's half of your task when it comes to the specific approach. When it comes to your specific approach for sentence equivalence and text completion, we have another technique called the rhyme or the rise technique. It's up to you what you want to call it. I like calling it the rise technique because I think of it as like, if I use the rise technique, my scores will rise, and that is an easy way to remember what it is, right? When you have a sentence equivalence or a text completion question, you read the sentence, you identify the keywords around that sentence that, give some meaning to what might go in the blanks. You make your own word or you synthesize your own word. Both of those mean the same thing. And then you eliminate other answer options. Now, with reading comprehension, you must be very familiar with what a passage, what an RC passage may look like, right? So you get a passage and then you get questions about the passage, right? I think This is, while the questions may be more challenging, they are not different to the kinds of questions that you may have gotten, or the kind of thing that you might have expected to see on reading comprehension all through your school life. On the other hand, sentence equivalence and text completion, they're slightly different. So I just want to touch upon them a little bit. So for example, most young children are often blank to old stories as they are unable to relate to the characters and lifestyles of olden times. All right, so this is a sentence equivalence question. You have 6 options, of which 2 options are correct. Okay, so that is a bit of the nuance around the sentence equivalence question. It's important to know that this is the case because it will help inform how you approach your study plan for it, right? The answer to this question has to come from the question itself. And it says that the children are unable to relate to the characters and lifestyles of olden times. So what that means is that what would go in the blank would be something about being unable to relate to characters and lifestyles. So you could say that they're often maybe uncaring towards old stories, you know, or that they don't really show much enthusiasm for old stories, right? They're bored with old stories, right? And if we look up options that have something that, you know, is close enough in meaning to these ideas that I was throwing about, you'll see that indifferent and apathetic do actually mean that. Empathetic, sympathetic, impertinent, and resistant don't. So you can eliminate those and you're left with indifferent and apathetic, which are the correct answers for this question. Similarly, for a text completion question, you have 3 blanks, or you could have 2 blanks or 1 blank as well, but you could have up to 3 blanks. And here you can only pick 1 correct answer for each blank, right? So although the provision of food to wild chimpanzees made them less blank and easier to study. So it would be something that made them easier to study, right? Made them less interesting, that doesn't really make sense. Made them less bashful, made them less shy. Bashful is also one of the 7 dwarfs, so I hope you know it from that. Less manageable and therefore easier to study, that makes no sense either, right? So therefore they were made less bashful and easier to study. It was found to blank their normal social patterns. So it was found to do something to their normal social patterns, which we don't know yet. So let's not try to answer question blank 2. Thereby rendering the implications of the study blank, right? So it was maybe found to disrupt their normal social patterns, making the study not as good, or it was found to, you know, make their social patterns more pronounced, which made the implications of the study more positive, right? So it's one or the other. So we're looking for something that's essentially contrasting ideas, right? So it was found to promote their normal social patterns. So we have promote and reinforce, which are very close in meaning, right? If their normal social patterns were promoted or were reinforced, in this context, the same thing is happening to them. What you know is that for a blank, you only have 1 correct answer. So you know that these answers are actually not correct and that their normal social patterns were disrupted. So it disrupted the normal social patterns, thereby rendering the implications of the study not as good as they were before, right? Incontrovertible is something that cannot be converted. It's something that cannot be refuted or rejected. All right, so it's definitely not that, right? The implications of the study were made more poor, or they were made dubious, right? They were made unsure. Corroborative just means that different people worked on them together, right? Or that different people agreed with the same results, right? So that's not really relevant for what we're looking for here. So the correct answer is bashful, disrupt, and dubious. All right, you have to get all 3 blanks correct for it to be correct, but hopefully this gives you a sense of what are the types of questions that you might expect to see. All right, now why it's important to know this is that you have 20 questions. If 10 of them are sentence equivalence and text completion and 10 are RC and CR, you need to know what your strong sections are and therefore what to target overall. For example, if you answer 13 questions correct in both the sections, you would get a score of approximately around 160. All right. If verbal is the harder section for you, and a lot of you do indicate that it is the harder section for you, you're probably then looking at getting a 160 in verbal and maybe a 162 to 165 in quant. That's a good enough score to get you in almost anywhere. So the moment you know that you were trying to answer maybe about 2/3 of questions, you know then that is like a target that would get you a long way there. If you answer about half the questions correctly, I think you are at a score of around 154 or so, 154 to 155, right? And that too is not a terrible score, right? Like if you get that and you get 165, say in quant because you're very good at quant, you're still looking at getting a 320. So keep in mind what it is that you're looking to target when you're doing this, when it comes to the specific part of your prep, all right? Now let's put all of this together and try to understand how we build a study schedule for it, okay? For verbal, right, you want to be preparing vocab from the start. You want to be preparing vocab all the way from the beginning, right, till the end, right? So week 0 to 8, if your preparation is 12 weeks, 0 to 12. If your preparation is 6 months, 0 to 26, right? You want to be preparing vocab all the way from here on out till the end because of the nature of it being organic. When it comes to a mathematics concept, let's say it's a concept in geometry, right? Or it's a concept in algebra. You read the concept, you learn the concept, you understand the concept. And once you've understood the concept, you're not going to forget it for a while. You know, you may forget it down the years, but you're not going to forget it for a while, at least as long as you're taking the GMAT. It is a concrete process that has a start and a finish. And with the concrete process, you can, you know, do what you want, right? You can approach taking quant questions of that time. On the other hand, vocab building is not a concrete process. It doesn't have an end point because you're not going to know all the words, right? First of all, knowing all the words is like basically impossible. Somebody like Shakespeare, for example, has an estimated vocabulary of 100,000. You're not going to get anywhere near 100,000. In addition to this, despite having 100,000 words that Shakespeare, you know, knew about, his plays apparently, so if you took the first 35,000 words used across his plays, he used about 5,500 words or something like that. So ultimately, even somebody with the largest vocabulary possible is only able to use a certain amount of it. Building your vocab is an organic process that will continue to happen up until the day that you die, you know, so keep your focus on it all throughout, all right? So that's something you've got to be doing all the way through. With understanding the types of questions, right? So we touched upon a little bit about, okay, you have RC questions, you have sentence equivalence questions, you have text completion questions. Understanding how these questions work, what is the approach to them? How are you going to take them on, right? So for example, knowing that a sentence equivalence question has 6 options, you have to pick 2 correct answers. How are you going to do that? By eliminating the other 4, right? Understanding this and learning to apply it should take the first 4 weeks of your prep, all right? And then in the last 4 weeks of your prep, you can do more drills regarding them, right? So in the first 4 weeks, it's a good idea to maybe focus on just the concepts themselves, how you can get around solving these kinds of questions. If you do drills, do small drills, you know, maybe 5 to 10 questions. Once you get to the higher level practice, you want to be doing bigger drills. You want to be doing more strenuous drills. You know, you know that a verbal section is 30 minutes long. Try doing 20 questions of SE. You know, that would take you 20 minutes. That would be a challenge. Try doing, you know, maybe 25 questions of SE and TC. Maybe try doing a full verbal section, right? You want to get to the higher level practice then, where you focus on attempting to answer more difficult questions while also putting yourself in the conditions that you would for a test. All right, so that's something that you want to look at in the verbal section. I see people raising their hands. Just please put in the questions in the Q&A and then we'll get to it when we're done with the slides, which we almost are. So yeah, if you do have questions, start filling them in. So I can already have questions, you know, waiting for me to answer. So for the quant section, it's a good idea maybe to spend a couple of weeks doing a basic math review. Now, if you think quant is the harder section for you, spend a bit more time doing quant then, all right? Maybe spend weeks 0 to 4 doing quant, right? And only spend a couple of weeks understanding the types of questions for verbal. But make sure you do a little bit of a review, you know, like people tend to forget things, particularly with some light trig and with some statistics and probability. People also tend to forget a little bit about the geometry that they've learned. So it's a good idea to go over it. It's a good idea to, you know, do your research there and make sure that you get up to speed. For all of this, by the way, you know, when it comes to vocab, when it comes to approaching the types of questions, when it comes to even the practice that you might do, we have plenty of resources and more. And a lot of it is free. And a lot of it is very easily accessible, and you can attempt it, without any kind of difficulty, or without any kind of barriers towards you being able to do this, right? We discussed at the start, for example, that we have YouTube videos, and if you want to understand, say, the RISE technique better, if you want to understand how to make a map better, you will have plenty of opportunities to do this, and you will have plenty of resources that are easily available to learn how to do this more effectively. All right, so keep that in mind. Now, yeah, like I said, you want to spend maybe the first couple of weeks doing a math review, then spend the next 4 weeks, right, weeks 3 to 6, actually breaking down the question types and approaches, right? So with verbal, you start doing this right off the bat because your vocab prep is just something that will happen slowly over time. With quant, you want to make sure you understand some of the concepts first, then start to break down the question types and how you would approach them, right? And then in the last couple of weeks, you can do the higher level practice, right? The reason for this is that you need less time for quant, honestly, right? You need more time for verbal. If you find that quant is harder for you, then yes, absolutely feel free to tweak this approach, right? We have put this approach together in mind for the people who need more help with verbal. If you need to do more with quant, then, maybe do 4 weeks of the math review, 2 weeks of breaking down the question types and approaches, and 2 weeks of the higher level practice, and maybe spend more time in those 2 or 4 weeks working hard on your questions. All right. Lastly, the final stage is the practice test. All right. Now, it's good news that many of you have not taken a lot of practice tests, because it gives you the opportunity to see where you're at and also plot your progression. Now, I'd say that at the start of your prep, all right, so maybe sometime around now, good idea to take a full-length practice test, but take it in test conditions. Every bit of studying that you do, as much as possible, take it in test conditions. If you do a drill, if you do a set of exercises, take it in test conditions. Set yourself time limits and try to do it like that, all right? So take a test to start with. Maybe 4 weeks into your prep, so that's once you're aware of all of the types of verbal questions, take another test then, see what you've progressed with, right? And then after 6 weeks of your prep, so another 2 weeks later, take another test, right? At this point, you're done with all of your approach for quant, and in your last 2 weeks, you will only be working on higher level questions to get to the top of your game, right? So it's a good idea to take another practice test there. Beyond this, I don't necessarily think that you have to take more tests. If you want to take one, maybe 2 days before the exam, go for it. I think that's also fine. But really, I think that if you take these 3 tests at these times, you should be fine. All right, so ultimately, you might have picked up on the fact that when it comes to building a study plan, I have given you a lot of freedom to sort of figure out how you want to do this and what you want to approach, right? The reason I have broken it down in this particular slide this way is that you understand what your challenges are. So when you're making your study plan, right, ultimately you don't have to follow this study plan exactly as I've laid it out. But what you do have to do and what you do have to be aware of is, what are you targeting from doing the study plan, right? What are you targeting when you do vocab prep, right? You're targeting your overall vocab. You're targeting something that's generic to your ability to do the verbal section. What are you targeting when you understand the types of questions and the approach? You're understanding what the test has in store for you. You are understanding the test better than other people may know the test, so that you know how to answer the questions appropriately for them, right? Lastly, with the practice, what are you trying to achieve from the practice, right? You then know already, having already done 3 practice tests, what your weak areas are, right? How are you going to work on them? Similarly for quant, like, you need to understand what it is specifically that you are trying to achieve from every session of studying. It shouldn't just be, oh, I'm studying the GRE today for a couple of hours, right? You'll never get anywhere if you do that, right? So you have to be aware specifically of what the challenges are and how you are going to go around overcoming. All right. So now I think that's pretty much all, I have to say in terms of the content. I just want to let you know as well that, if you sign up for our GRE online course, we have an offer on where if you use the code CRACKGRE50, you might want to take a screenshot of this, or I don't know, just take a picture on your phone, or maybe just remember CrackGRE, right? That's what people did before. It was super easy to just take pictures of stuff. The original price that we charge for this course is 8,500 rupees, which is in line with, what a lot of GRE courses tend to charge. However, because you've attended this webinar, we assume that you're the kind of student who wants to take ownership for their preparation, and sort of be in charge themselves, right? So we want to reward that, and we're giving you a 50% discount. So you could take this at 42.50 then, right? So yeah, just letting you know that that's something that is also available. And that's pretty much it. Now, if you want to have a demo class, you can also, call us at this number or mail us at gre@crackerbill.com. We'll be happy to get in touch with you. We're also based in Bangalore, right? So we have, if you are based in Bangalore as well, we have an office in Malleshwaram, which is where I'm speaking out of right now. We have another one in Koramangala as well, where lessons are also had, and our professors flit between both branches. So I teach lessons both in Malleshwaram and Koramangala as per when I'm required. All right, so yeah, this is all the info that's available to you. I'm going to go back to the study plan slide so that, if you want to maybe copy some info, take a screenshot or take a picture of it, you feel free to do that and have a sense of what you're looking to achieve with respect to verbal quant as well as the practice tests. All right. Somebody had touched upon studying for AWA. I'd say AWA is only something you should consider in the last week of your prep. Okay, don't bring it up until before then. That's honestly a fine time to discuss it, and then maybe just take up a few things regarding that. All right. Now I'm going to look over the questions that have been asked since the last time we stopped. Okay, so. I see somebody asking about, doing an MBA from ISB. If you're doing the GRE to help you do that, keep in mind that a good quant score translates very favorably for the GMAT, right? So for some of you, maybe taking the GRE and are looking to go to business school, if you take the GRE and go to business school, then your score gets converted to a GMAT score when you apply. And if you are to study this, so we have material on this that's available, but I will give you the gist of it. The way that it essentially works is that if you do very well on the quant section of the GRE, for whatever reason, the GMAT seems to value this. And when you transfer your score from GRE to GMAT, you get a really nice conversion. For example, I got a 170, a perfect score on the quant, and I got a 166 on the verbal. That score, when translated to a GMAT score, is a 780, which is honestly at like Harvard levels or something like that. Even though I personally know that if I were to take the GMAT, I probably wouldn't get a 780. I know that is a slightly inflated score. So if you are looking to do an MBA, yeah, good idea to take the GRE. If you're good at quant, it will totally be in your favor. When it comes to strategies for RC, I see that's another question being asked. The best strategy that I can give you is to make a map of the passage, right? And when you're approaching questions on the passage, consider this, that if you have to do 20 questions in a verbal section in 30 minutes, and 10 of them are RC and 10 of them are SE and TC, you want to spend about 20 minutes of your time on RC and about 10 minutes of your time on SE and TC. All right, so and the reason for this is because you actually have to read the questions before you answer them, right? So you want to spend as little time reading the questions and as much time actually answering them. If you see a passage which has 4 questions, you maybe want to spend about 3 to 3.5 minutes reading and making a map for them. And then the other remaining 4.5 minutes to actually solve the questions, right? 4.5 to 5 minutes. I see another question which goes, if we have taken multiple GRE tests, do we have the choice to use the highest marks among them? Or can we only use the latest marks? Now, you get the choice when you take the GRE to send the score to universities or not. You can send multiple scores to universities and they themselves will try to see you on your best day and take the highest one. That being said, if you get one score that's really poor and then you get a good score, I would not recommend sending the poor score as well. If let's say you get like a 285, which is not particularly a great score, which may not necessarily help you get into a lot of unis, but you know that you can do better and you prepare and you do put in all the effort, and then you get, say, a 310, which will get you into a lot of places. I would say that once you know that you got the 285, don't send that score in. All right. And when you take the GRE, at the end of the GRE itself, they at least tell you what your raw score is. Okay. They at least tell you what your score is on this scale from 260 to 340. Okay. So you can decide right then, do you want to send the scores to universities or not? So I see somebody saying, please share the list of words. So I don't recommend learning from a list of words. I don't recommend, what happens is that when people learn from a list of words, if it's a large list of words, they tend not to remember all of the words that they've learned. And when you learn it like that, you don't really learn the words in the context that you're expected to learn them. All right, so this is why I recommend root words, because now that I told you about curl, anywhere else where you see the word, where you see some word which partly uses curl, you will know that it's to do with font. Okay, and this applies with so many of these things. You know, for example, you know that something that happens in chronological order is something that happens from start to finish, you know, in time order, right? Now, if I tell you that the root chron, C-H-R-O-N, is the root for anything to do with time, you would be able to, you know, follow that up, and you'll see other words related to that as well. So they're there's things that happen in chronological order, but there are also things that that if you record things over time, they're called chronicles, right? Like the Chronicles of Narnia. If you do things at the same time, they are synchronized, right? If something feels out of the time that it is in, like, you know, to use a Marvel reference, how maybe Captain America feels about being in the present day, he would feel anachronous, like he is outside or he is not in the right time. So you may not know what the word anachronous means, but because now you are familiar with the fact that it's to do with time, you can at least sort of help yourself get to some of the way, right? So this is why root words are way more effective than just trying to learn a large list of words, you know, by heart. All right. The other thing is this, that when you learn root words, you tend to automatically also get a little bit of a context for them because you understand the words that are similar to them. If you learn words from a list and you memorize them, you only tend to learn the dictionary definition. And the GRE is often not testing you on the dictionary definition. They're testing you on your contextual understanding of what these words mean. All right. So this is why I personally don't have a list of words, and I don't recommend that you learn from a list. I recommend that you either use mnemonic devices, you use root words, or you take words that you know and start putting them in groups based on how you perceive them. How many hours is manageable to spend on each day? I think this will be very dependent on what your schedule is, right? If you're working full time, I wouldn't say that you can spend, say, 4 hours a day, you know, like you just aren't going to have the energy to do that, right? Like I work 51 hours a week, and when I get home, I am absolutely tired. So, you know, I don't even have the time to do any others. Like I barely have the time to do stuff that I consider fun. So, you know, I'd say this, that it is necessary that you spend about half an hour a day learning vocab. Okay, I think it is necessary that you do that. And if you could spend about an hour and a half to 2, I think that's fine. If you have more time and if you're not doing anything else, then yeah, by all means, if you think you can spend 4 hours a day, do it. But I would say that 2 hours is honestly fine. I think it is a reasonable amount, and if you follow the plan that we have mentioned, as you can see, there's both verbal and quant, right? So you want to spend maybe about half an hour going through verbal and half an hour going, half an hour going through vocab, maybe about 45 minutes learning the concepts and later on practicing them. And in quant, maybe, you know, the remaining 45 minutes, right? Learning stuff for 45 minutes, breaking down question types and approaches for about that long. And yeah, the same when it comes to practice. I think verb is probably a good idea to spend a little bit more of your time, right? So maybe an hour to an hour and 15 minutes, and quant maybe 45 minutes to an hour. But that should be fine. If you can spend more hours, do it. But honestly, I don't recommend spending more than 4 hours simply because, you know, there are diminishing returns. Well, once you hit 4 hours, your brain is not functioning at the same level that it was when you started learning. So you may not get the same amount out of it. So this is why I don't necessarily recommend studying past that. Do I have an effective word list? As I said, I don't maintain a word list simply because I think it's far more effective to learn words through their roots and through their etymology. You will ultimately come across a lot of words, you know, that would function in the same way as a word list if you study root words anyway. So I would recommend doing that, and I absolutely recommend getting that book, right? The Norman Lewis Word Power Made Easy. I see somebody saying that they are a 3rd semester BTech student. There is no hurry for for me, suggest some ways that will make sure that my vocab gets stellar eventually over the course of a year or two. So, like I said, like the approach that I said about picking the things that you like and reading a lot about them, this is ultimately the best way to pick up your vocab, right? It is about the content that you take in, and the better content you take in, the better your vocab will get. So what I would say is take the thing that you really like. If you like video games, read about video games. If you like ballet, read about ballet. If you like movies, read about how movies are made. Read about what is the process that goes into these things. What happens is this, that when you are an expert on a topic, okay, so let's take movies as an example. If somebody doesn't watch many movies and they don't consider themselves a movie buff, and nor are they very well sort of educated about movies, if they come out and they say, I didn't like this movie, or I like this movie a lot. If you ask them, okay, why did you not like this movie? They're just going to say, oh, it's kind of boring. Oh, I just didn't like it. Oh, maybe it dragged on too long. That's the limit of the analysis that you're going to get from them. On the other hand, if you get somebody who likes going to a bunch of movies, they'd say, oh, I didn't like the cinematography. I thought that the pacing of it was not appropriate. I think that the jokes that they used were not the right jokes to throw out for the target demographic. I think that they cut too quickly from one scene to another. I think that the plot had holes in it, right? That's the level that you will get from somebody who does watch quite a few movies. And then if you have somebody who's a total movie buff and is like, maybe makes their own short films as well, they're going to talk about, oh, the cinematography was improper in this scene. I don't agree with the policy of using hard cuts. I think that the set composition could have been improved on. The mise en scène was not ideal for this scene in the movie. They're going to use more and more complex words and ideas, right? So as you get deeper into any topic, just to be able to talk about things in that topic effectively, you are going to use more complex words and complex ideas because you are using them to describe more complex ideas. So if you have a lot of time on your hands, the best way to go about it is to constantly just read stuff that you like. And the reason I say read stuff that you like, I mean, everyone else will tell you read the paper. I don't say don't read the paper. I'd say read the paper as well. But, I know that a lot of people don't read the paper. You will actually read something if you care about the content, which is why I say take the thing that you really like reading and go deep into it. All right. I see somebody saying, please go to slide 16. What does research mean at the end of the screen? Let me look up. So let's go to slide number 16. Okay, so you have either an unscored or a research section in addition to the two sections of verbal and quant, and it comes at any point of time in the test. So you won't actually know which is the unscored or research section. A research section on the GRE essentially is a section where these are questions that you are not scored on, but they are trying to get your response to understand what level to place these questions at for future students. So the research questions essentially, if your data is being used to help them understand what do students find easy, what do students find hard, and how will that help us make future GRE questions effective. But you don't know which one it is, okay? It's not, you won't know which section is the research section. You have to treat every section like it is an equally important section on your test. Any tips on prepping for working folks? So I would say that the study plan that we outlined is pretty effective, and I would want you to maybe go through that study plan. Don't try to study more than 2 hours a day because you're not going to get too much out of it beyond that point. Another tip that I could maybe give you is note down at the start of a study session. So if you're going to study for 2 hours, or if you're going to study for an hour even, write down for a minute at the start of the session, what is it that I am looking to achieve from this session? What do I want to accomplish, and how am I, what is my target? Then start preparing. When you do this, you have set yourself a clear goal in your head, right? You know that, oh, in this session, this is what I want to achieve, right? I see people raising their hands. Can you please send in questions? And also, you know what? I'm going to accept questions up until the next 3 minutes. After that, I'm just going to get to the end of answering the question, all right? Because otherwise the session will just go on too long. But yeah, so yeah, if you want to get more, so if you're working, you have less time, right? You want to get more out of your time, set aside a goal for your session. At the end, you will get to examine, did I achieve this goal or not? Did I work towards this goal or not? And also, while you're studying, you will end up working towards your goal simply because you wrote it down at the beginning. So it's fresh in your mind. You're clearly thinking, okay, today I want to understand the nitty-gritty of an SE question. And you will study it and you will focus on it, right? And 30 minutes later, you can evaluate yourself. Did I understand what an SE question is like? Yes, I did. Good, I did my task, right? So that would be the best tip I can give if you're working. Are there a limited number of vocabulary words for the GRE? Yes and no. Theoretically, there is no limit. They could ask you any word. It's not like they have a specific list and they'll only ask words from that list. However, just because of the nature of the English language, there are words that they tend to prefer. So, in general, as you build up your vocab, you will come across more and more of these words. It's impossible to, pinpoint what specific ones they prefer simply because the moment, you come to a conclusion that, hey, the GRE likes these words, they will have caught on to you as well, and that will set a test where the words that they're testing you are are rather different. Right? So essentially, I'd say no limited words, all right? Like try to build your vocab any way possible. Will you give us the link to yesterday's session? Not me personally, but I think Crackerbill might be able to give you the link. I'm not sure exactly how that process works, but you can mail us at prep@crackerbill.com and we'd be happy to help provide you with the links. I think if we had recorded them effectively ourselves. Does Crackerbill offer physical or soft copies of the vocab flashcards? How do we get access to them? We offer both. I will bring up the flashcard slide, and as you can see, there is a Dropbox link. That is how you can access them as a soft copy. However, you can also buy them off Flipkart and Amazon as hard copies. And I think they cost about 200 or 300 bucks, I'm not sure. If you prefer to actually have physical cards to help you learn words, I think that I would. So that would be my way of going about it. However, yeah, you can get the soft copies of the cards available for free, right? And if you do have budgetary constraints, then obviously this is what you might want to do. Is there a podcast on any words, their meanings? I'm presuming here that you're looking at a podcast that might help you build your vocabulary. So tomorrow's session, which will be conducted by one of our instructors, Shivaranjani, she is going to do this webinar entirely, where the focus is entirely on building your vocab. All right, she can give you more detail there. However, as I said, a good way to build your vocab are the things that I've said. You won't generally have podcasts where they're just saying, oh, this is the word, this is the meaning. Like a lot of people just wouldn't be into that. So, and in general, podcasts tend to cater to, audiences based in the first world, simply because I think they have better labor rights there, so people have more time on their hands to watch and listen to podcasts. So that's something I would say. All right, I see another question which is coming, which says, I have only 1 month for my GRE prep. Please suggest how to improve vocab. I am hoping that because you said you have only 1 month, that you're not doing anything else, that you're not also working. All right. In that case, I would say, I said that you could study two hours a day, and that should be fine across the 8 weeks. You have to amp that up. You got to do twice as much, right? Consider maybe you do a morning session and think of that as a day, and think of an evening session as a day. So maybe do 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening. All right. For improving vocab itself, yes, absolutely do the root words. Do 2. So the way that the Word Power Made Easy book is structured is that it has 42 exercises, and the 42 exercises are designed to take about 20 minutes each. So it's designed to help you build it in about 6 to 7 weeks. If you do 2 exercises a day, you can do it in a month, right? So I would recommend doing that if you just have a month. Please suggest good newspapers and articles with specific topics to help vocab and sentence making. Okay, so I would recommend that you go on The Guardian. The Guardian is a good newspaper, and if you just go to the Guardian homepage, the way it's structured is that if you scroll down, you'll see about like 50 articles just on the homepage. when it says articles with specific topics, I don't think that there are specific topics that are going to necessarily help your vocab more than others. What I think is that as long as you read challenging and enriching content about the topic that you like, you will build your vocab. So my recommendation would be go on The Guardian. You'll see about 50 articles. Maybe you'll like 2, out of the 50. Maybe even just 1. But make sure you read that article that day. If you like 2, then even better. Read those 2 articles that day. But the way that you will help build your vocab by reading newspaper articles is because you're reading content that is engaging you, that will have words that you're not used, right? And of course, I think, the quality of the newspaper does matter to some extent. So, I would not recommend that you read something like the Daily Mail or the Telegraph, for example. I think the Guardian would be better. If you're looking for a local newspaper, the Hindu is good. And the Hindu has great long reads as well. So if you want something, the most specific information I can give you is maybe to go and look at the long reads for both the Guardian and the Hindu. They are, like articles that are written which really cover a topic in depth, and I think that they're quite engaging because they sort of take you on a story as well. So yeah, I would totally recommend that you do that. Right? 1 month plan, please. That's another question that's already been asked, so I'll just move on. Please suggest specific books and syllabus for each section. So we have GRE, verbal and quant books that you can find online as well. And like those would have specific practice questions. However, there isn't really a specific syllabus per se. What you're best off doing is to look up the content that's already available online, or maybe if you sign up for the online course, the content there is a little bit more structured. So if you go through a playlist, it will take you through the approach to each type of question. So it's not really a syllabus, but more about, okay, if we look at SE questions, what is an SE question? What is it like? What can you expect to see? What are they testing from it? What are traps that they would set for you in such questions? All of this and more is covered on our verbal section. If you want to think of that as a syllabus, that would be something that is available to you on the GRE Online Course. All right, so final question for the day. Please explain the next steps after taking the GRE till the end of submitting the application right after giving the GRE. Okay, interesting, because you said right after taking the GRE, which is the correct way to say it, and then later on you said giving GRE. I know it's very common in India to say giving an exam, because I think all Indian languages, like that's both the Indo-Aryan and Indo-European and Dravidian languages, all translated as giving a test, right? So I understand why people make that mistake, but just keep in mind that it is taking a test. But yeah, so the steps after this essentially would be sending out your application itself. In fact, your GRE could even be the last thing that you do, and sending out your application could come first. So what you have to do there is essentially make sure that you understand what unis you're looking to apply to, and you may have to write little mini essays depending on your uni. I think, to be honest, that Shrikala covered a lot more about this specific topic better yesterday, because she is the admissions expert and she sort of understands the process better with once you've got the GRE, what do you do with it? The only advice I can give you is that like, it's not really after taking the GRE, but like consider where you want to study before you take the GRE itself. Understand what it is that you're looking to achieve from taking a master's program early on itself. All right, I'm just going to look at the chat to see if anyone else has put questions on the chat itself. Okay, see that some people have trouble with the verbal section. Yes, that is understandable. Somebody says that they got 139 in verbal and 168 in quant. If somebody is at that level, I don't know if you're still on the chat or not, but if you are, what I would recommend to you is that you spend more of your time on verbal then, right? So the plan that I've set aside, if you raise your hand, just put the question in on the chat, okay, and I'll see if I can get to it. If you're already at that level on quant, then I'd say that you don't really need any prep for quant. You're fine. You're like 168 is a great score. So then consider maybe spending much more of your time on verbal, right? If I recommended spending maybe an hour and 15 minutes a day on verbal, maybe you spend 2 hours on that then, right? ultimately, the formula that I've given you here, or rather the structure that I've given you for your preparation here, is customizable, is variable, and I want it to be that way because your specific conditions are going to be variable, right? That being said, the order in which you should take the practice test still holds true, right? Like take one now, take one after 4 weeks, take one after 6 weeks. Okay, so understanding content. So I see a lot of questions about like the specifics of answering questions in the GRE itself, and I don't. You will probably have a little bit more on this in the next 2 sessions, all right? The next one is specifically about vocab and understanding the contextual meaning, which is something I see that's been brought up. See, people have trouble remembering and learning words. All of this will be discussed in great depth in the session tomorrow. The session tomorrow is very specifically focused towards you, understanding how to build your vocab. Which is the best word list, Barron's or Magoosh, apart from word power and easy? Just word power and easy. Is that alone sufficient to crack GRE verbal? I would say, honestly, yes, but it is how you approach it. You have to have that view that I am going to learn the roots of words, all right? And ultimately, it is in your interest to do so because, as we discussed this before, root words help you understand more complex words, all right? So, for example, SOM tends to be a root for sleep. So that's so for example, insomnia is the lack of sleep. On the other hand, LOQ or LOG tends to be the root for anything to do with talking. So somebody who is loquacious talks a lot. Somebody who is circumloquacious talks around the point, right? Circumloquacious. Similarly, somebody who is doing somniloquy. Now we know from 2 roots, sleep and talk. Somebody who is doing somniloquy is talking in their sleep, right? So this is why learning root words, I can't stress it enough, is very, very effective. Other word lists, I mean, you could maybe look at like Barron's, Magoosh, any of these other ones. It's fine, and I mean, I won't say don't look up a word list, but honestly, I wouldn't say that that's my first choice when it comes to considering how you want to approach the GRE. All right. Can I finish GRE in a month if I allocate an entire day for prep? Absolutely, yes. Yeah, like 1 month, as far as the 1 month plan goes, it's the same as the plan that I've given here. So the 2 month plan that I've given assumes that, well, one, you have other things to do, maybe like university or work or something like that. And I've assumed that you would maybe be prepping about 2 hours a day. If you only have 1 month, what I recommend is that you do 4 hours a day instead, and you do a morning session and an evening session. And you would absolutely be able to complete it so long as you take this approach, right? Just divide all the numbers by half, right? Like understand the types of questions in 2 weeks, but you'll still have the same number of sessions where you do it. So it doesn't really make a difference that way. I think all of the other questions have already been addressed on the question and answer forum. So I think that brings an end to this session. I hope it was very useful for you. Just let me know in the chat, type in 1 if you felt that this was useful to you. I'd like to know your feedback as well. All right. And yes, if you have a 2-week plan, follow the plan as I said. If you have a 2-month plan, follow it as I said. If you have a 1-month plan, same as what I've given here, but try to focus it, try to double up, right? I'm just going to leave it on this screen for about 30 seconds so that you can remember to take a picture of it or screenshot it so that you have a sense of what this is. But the nitty-gritty of how you actually solve a question, that's something that you would have to, we will address this in later, I think in the webinars that happen, tomorrow and the day after. But more than that, I would say that if you either sign up for the online course or even if you look through the video content, that should give you a better sense of the nitty-gritty of actually solving a question. This is just a template by which you want to work towards solving questions themselves. All right, so hope this was useful. I'm going to sign out now. Take care, and if you're interested, I may see you tomorrow. Sorry, not me personally, but you will be on the GRE webinars. And Sivranjani is a very, very capable instructor, and She has a lot of good info about building vocab. I know a lot of you asked questions about vocab that I couldn't get into full detail that I would have liked to. So tomorrow's session would be very helpful for you. All right. Have a great day. And yeah, good luck with your GRE prep.